Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another installment of Warriors of Attraction. My name's Adam. We're back and we're ready to end this stigma and get another story out there. And I believe this is going to be one of the best stories you're ever going to see. I'm probably going to get his surname absolutely incorrect. So I'm actually going to give it a go because that's all we can do. But first, I'm going to welcome my co-host, Andrea. Hello.
Hey.
How are you?
I'm good. I hope everybody out there is good.
Absolutely.
As well.
Yes, let's do it. Right, let's waste no time. Let's bring Ben on.
Let's do it.
That? Right, so please all share this, guys, and enjoy. My mouse froze then. Hello, Ben.
Uh-oh.
How's it going, guys?
I'm all right.
Hey,
right.
Ben.
Please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm going to give it a go. Ben Doughty.
Perfect.
Oh, got it in one.
Yeah.
I bet you've had a lot of mistakes with that, aren't you?
Doherty, a lot of people seem to think it is. People think I'm Irish and they think my surname is Doherty. But no, it's Doughty, and Doughty is actually an English word. It's an adjective.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I'm just tagging you now in it. So, cool. Andrea, if you want to kickstart this show, I'm more than welcome to.
Well, everyone, welcome to Warriors of Attraction with my wonderful brother, Adam, the Mental Health Warrior King. Hey! And myself, the Empathy Vulnerability Warrior. And our wonderful guest, Ben Doughty.
Doughty.
Yeah. See, I messed it up.
American
Ben Doughty.
Yeah, you got it.
Thank you. Yeah, because they have us over here sounding everything out. And when you go to other countries, it's not the same pronunciation at all. So thank you for your grace. Welcome.
Glad to be here.
You're more than welcome. Right, because I thought, you know what, we did it with Natalie, so let's do it with you. Quick fire questions to lighten the mood. So I'm going to quick start and saying cat or dog?
I'm not an animal lover, really, but I imagine I'd probably say dog, because some of my friends are real dog lovers, and I get the fact that there's actually an old, very tiresome cliche in boxing circles that says if you want loyalty, buy a dog. As much as I'm sick to death of hearing it in this particular industry, I'm going to say dog.
Okay, then. Night owl or early bird?
I used to be a night owl, but that wasn't so good for me. So now I am an early bird. I do tend to get up early. I guess it's one of them things in your old age.
Training.
Boring and stuff,
okay, then. Pineapple belong on pizzas, does it?
I would say with ham, yes. It's a legitimate combination of savoury and sweet with ham. I'm not a big fan of it, but I'm not going to say it's absolute sacrilege.
No. All right, and last one which I've never asked before. Which is tougher, heavyweight or welterweight?
There is no such distinction. It all depends. It's not the size of the dog in the fight, but the size of the dog at the fight of the dog. You get heavyweight to a. I'll tell you one thing though. In terms of what's the tougher division to get to the top end, definitely welterweight, because the world and his brother is around about 147 pounds when he's trained down to kilo weight. There's not so many guys. There's not so many human beings who are as big as kind of 230 pounds plus, 240 pounds plus, the Tyson Furies, etc., Anthony Joshua's. So inevitably, while it's still very tough to get to the top, they have less competition because most people are not that big.
All right, and last question, then we'll go straight. Who would you rather be in the ring with, Muhammad Ali or Mike Tyson?
I would say Muhammad Ali. Two reasons. One, because Muhammad Ali is my idol, and it'd just be the honour of being in with him in that very hypothetical, unlikely scenario. And in terms of dreading what was coming at you more, even though I think Ali was a greater fighter and is a better fighter, and I think Ali would have beat Mike Tyson, I'd still rather face his wrath than Mike's, because they both beat me, and Mike would beat me worse. Ali would probably play with me.
It's that power, isn't it? It's that power of
and the speed and the mentality. There was Norman Mailer, who wrote a book about Muhammad Ali and George Foreman's fight in Zaire. He wrote a book about the whole kind of build-up and the fight itself. And he said there was something about, he was exploring the different dynamics and a mindset to the two protagonists. And he said there is something about Muhammad Ali that suggests he would not hurt an average man, but would simply dispose of each attack with a minimal move, which is very much Ali, not needing to show his superiority where it was too obvious. It says, whereas Foreman would just go on forever in an absolute killing spree. And I feel that way about Mike Tyson too. So that's why I would like to swerve him.
All right, then. Yeah, and I thought I'd give a dig out there. Anthony Joshua, if you're watching this at some point, which will be a miracle, get that contract signed.
That ship has sailed, Adam. That ship has sailed.
Oh, is it?
Tyson Fury will definitely not be boxing Anthony Joshua this year in December. He's fighting Derek Chisora, a guy that he's already beaten twice, most recently 8 years ago. And that's the way it is.
I was up for Fury anyway.
Yeah.
I like Fury. Anyway, crack on with the show. Hello, Kerry. Hello, Andrea's mum, Stella. Welcome. Please all share this in awareness. Right, let's kickstart. I'm going to give the biggest question as it is. Before all your journey into becoming, I'm going to say, a boxing journalist, who is the real Ben Doughty, like growing up and coming across mental health and stuff like that?
Well, I was born in Merseyside, a place called Birkenhead, or I was born in that hospital anyway. I grew up, spent 8 years of my life on the Wirral. That's a certain part of England, that's near to Liverpool. And then we moved to the Cotswolds, Gloucestershire, when I was 8. And I grew up there. I found boxing pretty early at 10 years old. So that was my whole kind of, that was my focus from 10 years old onwards, was initially boxing and dreams of being, a champion fighter like my idols, Muhammad Ali and Sugar Ray Leonard. And I went through that process. But for me, I kind of went off the rails a little bit when I was around about 18, 19, when those things, the things that enter a young man's life that are not really, when you're like 10, 11 and 12 and 13, you're probably still focused and still pretty pure in terms of your mind and your habits and your intentions. When you discover stuff like, going out, drinking, girls, drugs, and those kind of distractions and the street vices, my head was turned by all of that, really. When you talk about mental health, I mean, I think I'm blessed not to have ever suffered what I would regard as mental health issues. I think these days we live in an era when there's a lot of media about mental health, which is a good thing and a positive thing because people have much more respect for it. But if there is a flip side, I think it's that the world and his brother or sister tends to claim mental health issues now, which might muddy the waters somewhat and detract from some of the more serious issues people have. My experience of mental health, though, I mean, obviously I had issues with addiction, which some people would say is a straight up mental health issue. I am a recovering alcoholic. So if someone wants to say, well, hang on a second, you do have mental health issues, then I'll hold my hands up if that's the way they wish to categorize it, But my father, who was also an alcoholic, suffered from depression, absolutely. And he suffered from those kind of issues in an era when it was easier not to get a diagnosis and not to get so much sympathy and help. So I was aware that he lived in constant battle with the black dog, as Churchill used to call it. So that was if I have a sympathy and an insight into people who are depressed to the point where they can't get along with their day and they can't be successful, upbeat and happy, then it comes from my father.
Wow. Andrea?
Well, I agree with you, Ben, as far as, when it comes to mental health. I could see that. I mean, but, there's also times when 12-year-olds, they're devin out there in drugs and alcohol too.
Yeah.
And, it comes from probably things that they've had to deal with or traumatic events in people's lives. And a lot of boxers that I've met here, I mean, we have Bud Crawford. He's my nephew.
Are you kidding me?
And, oh, no.
Oh, well, here we go.
You wait until 9 minutes and 49 seconds to tell me that.
Well, I didn't know if you would know, but you should.
Terence Crawford is probably the best fighter at any weight in the world. Some people might prefer, like Alexander Usyk is one of those guys, or a Naoya Inoue, or even a Canelo Alvarez. But there's a strong argument that Terence Bud Crawford is the best fighter in the world at any weight whatsoever.
I feel like he does, and I don't feel like just because he's my nephew, I watch him. I watch him, and I'm so delighted to watch him because he's so humble. Yeah. Even though he's humble, and he's going to give you your money's worth. You know what I'm saying? When he's doing his boxing, because he's a showman, and he wants everybody to get their money's worth, and he's going to drag it out because he could go in and just take them down quickly. But if he gets hit a couple of times, or somebody, he gets stagnated a little just for a second, watch out, because he's coming out and it's over. He's going to do it and it'll be done. But I think that he's humble and charismatic. I also have a son. They call him Ray Spider-Man Evans, who does mixed martial arts.
Yeah.
And he just had a fight not too long ago, but he's moving up into trying to get into the pros, semi-pro. He's moving up the chain. So, when it comes to, I see the two of them as being the type of boxers that's how it was for them with life. You know what I mean? You had to fight. You know what I mean? And putting it in the ring and making something, of a life out of it, I think that's fabulous. I think that's genius. You know what I mean? It's something that brings it out. Of them.
Sorry. I just went there because somebody's trying to call me. There's a bit of a scandal going on in British boxing right now, and I imagine the person was trying to call me about that. But when that happens, I'm just canceled.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
That's okay.
That's the life of the busy journalist.
It is. Yes. It is. Well, I can't wait to hear the scandal.
Well, I don't want to digress too much from what you guys might wish to talk about, but for what it's worth, there is a guy called Conor Benn, son of Nigel Benn, who failed a drug test recently by the Voluntary Anti-Doping Association, VADA. It led to the 11th hour cancellation of a very big fight between Conor Benn and Chris Eubank Jr. The whole commercial appeal was based on the fact their fathers fought iconically in British boxing history twice back in the 90s. Everybody was waiting to see this because they were the sons of the fathers, and because Conor Benn failed the drug test, his A sample came back dirty. It's created a whole lot of reverberations and knock-on effect, which is raging on to this day, having started back in early October. And I imagine there's a new rumor, which I haven't yet heard because I've just finished a 2-hour class and people are probably trying to tell me something, but they can wait.
Wow. Sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Sounds interesting. But I think that a lot of the time too, that a lot of these boxers, these younger ones that are coming out here, and it's all about, they may have some things that they're dealing with, you know what I'm saying? And they put it into their craft, which is fighting.
Yeah, and I think I'm writing a book at the moment about a fighter called Tony Ayala Jr., who was a notorious figure in the history of boxing because he was supposed to be a can't miss all-time great, was going to be like a once in a generation kind of fighter, and he ended up, he started shooting heroin at the age of 12, it turns out, and he was drinking and stuff, and a lot of emotional problems, brought up in a very macho Mexican-American family. You can't sugarcoat the story. He ended up committing a violent rape on New Year's Day, 1983, and he got sent away for a very long time. But I'm writing a book about his story because it wasn't just his story, it's a family story. The four brothers were all boxers, but the point being that you see some of these people, a lot of fighters have got severe emotional problems and a lot of stuff going on, and they've got issues with addiction and all the rest of it too. And some of them do end very tragically. Too many of them. I have one particular client who trains with me every day, and I regale her with stories about fighters from boxing's rich history. And often she says to me, is he still around? And far too often do I have to explain that they died of a drug overdose, they were murdered, they killed somebody, and much more often than if I was telling her about the legends of tennis, I imagine,
Yeah. Absolutely. Which I have to put that out there. I do actually believe, after watching him, Ricky Hatton was experiencing some sort of maybe trauma in his life. I don't know.
Yeah, Ricky had well documented alcohol and drug issues.
Yeah.
And I think behind that cheeky chappy, the boy next door, he was very lovable. He was in
Manchester,
everywhere.
yeah.
People flocked to support him, even across the pond. He could take 20,000 Brits over to Las Vegas with him for a big fight, like against Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao, because he was so popular. And one of his team once said the reason why he draws this many people to a weigh-in, never mind a fight, is because half of this lot literally had a pint with him. And the thing is, I think behind him being that very kind of gregarious, unpretentious Manchester lad, he had stuff going on as well, like tears of a clown syndrome. And at one point he was sitting in the dark in his sumptuous house one night, ready to cut his wrists with a knife or to kill himself in some kind of way, because he got to that despairing point, and that is a person on the face of it who has everything. He's a revered British boxing icon. He's wealthy, he's loved, he's got support, one would think, if he needs to turn to it. He's well situated, but he felt like ending his life because he felt absolutely hopeless. So people say that mental health doesn't discriminate, and clearly it doesn't.
Absolutely.
Not at all.
Yeah, and obviously you going through school, obviously, as you said, you was into boxing at a very young age. Did your friends and family not say, right, come on, let's pick something else other than boxing?
Oh, did they
try pressuring you away from it?
It's funny, it's quite intuitive of you to ask that question, Adam, because my mum hated it. She didn't like it. First of all, she had natural protective mother feelings, which, a lot of mothers don't ideally want their sons to be boxers. Although I know some that do and are very supportive of it and actually want that life for them. Most mothers would rather you pick something else anyway for a start. But also, my mother had these, I would say, middle-class ideas, and boxing was very much a kind of, what she saw as a plebeian sport populated by plebeian people. And she just didn't like it. She didn't like the culture. She didn't like the idea of me being involved in it. She figured she didn't mind so much me boxing amateur and such, but I think the idea that I wanted to turn pro and do it, as a way of life and a career, she was very much against that for a whole host of reasons. And consequently, my mum and my stepfather, whom I didn't get on with terribly well for a lot of the time, they would automatically downplay my ability or achievements and try to convince me that I was on a hide into nothing and it was a negative career and you always come out a loser. I didn't turn pro, by the way. It wasn't because it wasn't anything to do with their kind of discouragement or opposition to the idea. That was me going off the rails and not staying focused at a time when that, was important. But my father, who broke up with my mum when I was 5, he was very, very in favour of it and would give me a lot of encouragement, but he wasn't there all the time. He was the absentee parent. He lived in London. We didn't, we lived in Gloucestershire. So my dad was for it, but my mother and my stepfather were absolutely not for it. And there wasn't that kind of encouragement at home, no.
Which is normal behaviour. It's normal behaviour, yeah. Yeah, because no mother wants to see the son getting hurt or anything like that. It's like sugarcoating them in that bubble.
Although,
I
get that.
Andrea said that her son is a fighter, so I don't know how you feel about it. Is it something you've
I tell you, well, I can't say that it's something I'd rather he didn't do, because I have 7 children, Ben.
Okay.
And, I try to support them in whatever they do, but I have to say that when I'm attending his fights and his bouts, I feel, people are always coming up to me. I'm serious, you know what I'm saying? And they're coming up to me asking me, well, Mama, are you all right? And I'm like, I'm gonna be all right. You know what I'm saying? I probably am just as nervous as anybody else,
Surely,
and being his mother. Yeah. And then, of course, I want to be all up on the gate. You know what I mean? When he's boxing, I want to be all up. So I'm blocking people.
Yeah.
And, people are telling me, move out the way. And I'm like, it's my son and I'm going to stand here. And, they'll be nice. And there are gentlemen, in the front rows that'll let me come and sit there, give me their seats so that I can sit there without getting, in trouble. So it's nerve-wracking as a mom, and all I can do is, please, keep him safe and, from harm, from being hurt. He's been hurt, he comes home sometimes. I busted up, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's just collateral damage. I mean, when we talk about getting hurt in combat sports, it has to be pretty serious before that registers with us. We think of something serious or career ending or even worse. It just facial injuries and stuff. That's just part of the course.
But I love his body. The fact that he has the mentality to be true to it. You know what I'm saying? If I'm cooking a big meal and he comes over, he'll walk away from a lot of things that he can't have. You know what I'm saying? So that part of it makes me really happy because he takes really good care of himself.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. Are you like that, Ben? Like, for example, around Christmas or something like that, when Christmas dinner's there, are you like fussy?
No, not really. I mean, I think like a lot of Xboxers, I keep an eye on my weight, or I weigh myself a lot. Like, to be honest, obsessively. But if I'm not staying at my girlfriend's house who hasn't got scales, if I'm at my house, I go on the scales every morning. And I think a lot of boxers do that, but I don't diet hardcore anymore because I don't have to. I retired from my amateur boxing career quite a few years ago. So, but I like to still be down to what I regard as an ideal post, retirement weight. And if I think I'm getting a little too heavy, or I see a picture where I think I just look a little too thick in it, then I start, dieting a bit. We know how to lose weight as ex-boxers, so I'll be, eating clean and drinking a lot of water when I want to drop a few kilos. So I think most boxers do remain semi-obsessed with their weight, I think.
Yeah, I've just got a comment there off Andrea's mum.
Oh, yeah?
Dad was a boxer
Andrea's
in
dad.
Oklahoma.
So you come from a rich fighting lineage, basically, Andrea.
That's what yes. And my grandmother loved wrestling. We used to, she used to take my mom and my uncle, her children, to wrestling matches with the big time wrestlers that would come. So it is. And then my son, Ray, his dad, he was a Golden Glove.
Okay. Nebraska Golden Glove, right?
Yeah. And then his grandmother, or my mother-in-law, she used to sew she was a seamstress, and so she would make a lot of the
robes and stuff, the trunks.
The robes and oh man, she was cold at it too. So it does run rich in our family. That's probably why I don't say to my son, don't do that. You know what I'm saying? I know that that's something that we've had family members who are successful at doing it. So why not encourage them?
Yeah,
exactly. Oh, I'm just being terrorized here.
You got the cat there, yeah.
Yeah, she's terrorizing me here. But yeah, it is. It's easy to jump at like being obsessive with like your weight or fitness and stuff like that when you are an athlete. Yeah. In this environment, in this world. Now, obviously, I know I'm not in the best shape at the minute, but I'm trying to drink as much herbal tea as I can.
Water. Yes.
I mean, I don't drink alcohol anymore. I haven't had a drink for about 5.5 years, so that's obviously helped with my general regime. But I will eat junk food. I will eat burgers and fry-ups. I will eat sweets, cookies, whatever. You try not to go mad, but I don't. What I found was when I wanted to lose a bunch of weight early in the summer, I was very Spartan and very clean for maybe 6 weeks, and the weight just dropped off like that. And once I got to the weight I wanted to be, I started to be a lot less fastidious again, and I was enamored initially of eating junk and sweets and stuff and not seeing any weight gain, because you don't after a while when you've established a good pattern. But if you keep doing it, it will catch up with you, and then you get on and you realize you've gone up 3 kilos and you're like, oh damn, I've got to go back to behaving well again,
That's my son. That's my son.
Really...
Go on, Andrea.
Sorry. No, you go ahead. I was just going to say
that's my son. Obviously, he's 10 years old and he's got autism. Obviously, that's no excuse, but we feel like we keep saying that he's got 2 stomachs because he can eat and eat and eat and eat and eat, but he never puts weight on. But we're thinking long term here. So when he gets to an adult stage, when he's like 16, 17 years old, it's going to catch up to him. So this is why we're trying to balance it now. But he's actually already told me when he's like 13, 14, he wants me to take him to the gym. So I'm like, no problem with that.
Yeah.
Right. And it's helpful for me, with my son, because he helps me to be conscious of my own, eating habits and things like that. And I learn a lot from him. I mean, and recently, every year when I go for my appointment, I've lost 10 pounds. And I know it's because I'm not over here doing all that exercise really. I do a lot of walking, and I love to dance. I'll dance a lot, around the house or wherever. But at the end of the day, I don't obsess. I don't have a scale in my home to weigh myself, because I was definitely tied to it, because my body image, body image can be good, or it could be on the other side. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, with my son, being able to know the best things for me, I bake things. I don't fry chicken and fish and stuff like that much anymore. I do a lot of baking of my meats and stuff like that. So it helps. It helps me to do better,
Yeah, I air fry my chicken. Air fry it.
Yes, you were talking about the air fryer. I got to get me an air fryer.
I got one, but I hardly ever use it. I've used it a couple of times. I prefer a steamer, to be honest with you, Adam. I like the steamer with the 3 levels to it. And you can put the chicken in first, and the potatoes maybe, or whatever you're doing, vegetables, and you put the greens in maybe just for 10 minutes after that. You keep stacking it according to your needs. You've got different levels to cook things at different times with the steamer. And it does a pretty good job.
I need to get a steamer.
Yeah,
steamers are good. And they only cost about 20 quid or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've seen a couple of them in B&M bargains anyway. So yeah, I'm going shopping.
Yeah. You see, George Foreman used to pretend, when George Foreman came back in his dotage when he was, older, in that kind of genial grandfather persona that he suddenly had, he used to publicize the fact that he liked eating cheeseburgers. He kept saying he was an eating machine and a boxing machine, and he was lived off cheeseburgers, which he didn't, of course. People said privately he was happier eating steamed chicken and fish, and that's what he ate. But as far as his PR was concerned, because he just liked the angle and it made him kind of this fun-loving kind of reinvention of his personality, he said he loved cheeseburgers, but don't believe a word of it.
No. When I do cheeseburgers, obviously I do the mince and stuff like that. But instead of actually frying it, I put it in the waffle maker. So there's literally no grease going to it. But when it comes to oil, I use the light fry instead of the oil.
We're talking of frying things, but without oil. Talking to George Foreman in the Foreman grill, which obviously is a sloped grill. That's the whole point of it.
Yeah, it pulls it out.
This is how stupid I am capable of being on occasion, But it's said in the thing. It gives you a little paperwork with it, right? It gives you a manual. It tells you what you can cook in it, right? And it says a lot of things. It says you can cook eggs. It says you can make eggs on there. So I believe it. I've got no. I'm completely credulous because the manual says you can cook eggs. Now, obviously, it doesn't take a genius to figure out if you crack an egg, like you open an egg onto a sloped grill, what's going to happen? Right?
It's going to slide on down.
But I believe the paperwork, so I just got it sizzling, got it heated. Then I cracked this egg, which obviously fell straight off it and hit the kitchen work surface. And then I figured, you know what? You can fry eggs on a Foreman grill, but you need to take the drip tray and balance it underneath the thing so it's no longer a sloped grill. It can't be a sloped grill if you want to fry eggs. It works.
That's all right.
Even that stuff up. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to even it up.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. Back to you.
I'm going to have to go. I have a Foreman grill. I'm getting ready to have to go down there and try to test out cooking some eggs on it now.
Yeah,
right?
Listen, it works, Andrea. It works. They're a bit crinkle cut. They're a bit they've got ridges in them, as you can imagine, because the grill once again. But they work, and it's like a boiled egg in the shape of a fried egg that tastes like a fried egg. Try it.
I'm gonna try.
We digress.
Okay. All right. Okay. I'll get Stella's comment in a minute. What is the worst fight and what damage have you actually received in this fight, and what impact did it have on your mindset coming out? So that's 3 questions in one there.
Dang.
You know what? Personal injuries for me, I have not really had any worth writing home about. I mean, I had 38 amateur fights. Okay. I mean, I trained professional boxers and the like, but and amateur fighters. But myself, my competitive experience is limited to the amateur code. I had 30 fights between the ages of 11 and 34. And I never really got injured in any of them. I got a cut eye one time, 2003, against a decent kid in a fight in Hackney somewhere on a dinner show. The referee stopped it in the third round. I figured I was okay. I was fine. It only required a few stitches, I think, or one of those butterfly strips. I forget. I don't think they gave me stitches. I think they did the butterfly thing. And so that was a cut eye. I've experienced a cut eye twice, actually. I got once in sparring once from a clash of heads as well, when I wasn't wearing a head guard, which you're supposed to when you're in the gym. So that was my fault. So 2 cut eyes. My nose has been reshaped, clearly. I mean, I wasn't born like this. So, it used to be straight and kind of more petite and cuter, I guess. But, but that wasn't a one-off injury. That was progressive over time, the flat nose that I've got, which is kind of, it's a cliched feature of a boxer. I think that the stereotype of a boxer has got a flat nose, even though a lot of the good ones don't have them, for obvious reasons. But no, but I've never been knocked out. Such, I mean, you know what? The worst thing to receive, although it's perfectly survivable and you will live, is a really crippling body shot when somebody hits you in the solar plexus or the floating rib. When they catch you just right in the sweet spot, it will take all the air out of you, and it makes you temporarily feel like you're dying. You're absolutely not dying, but you can't get up usually if you fall to your knee or whatever.
The shock, isn't it? The shock.
Yeah, and I think most fighters will tell you that the most excruciating actual physical pain that they will feel and disablement is from a body shot. I think I've had it probably about twice in my life, and that's enough for me, to be honest with you. Not in recent years. So generally, I've been pretty lucky. I haven't injury from boxing at all, but I think the question involved mindset. I got stopped once. I got to the England quarterfinals when I was 15, back in 1985, and I lost. I got stopped in the first round by this kid who was just too strong for me at the time. I was a little ring rusty because I'd had buys in a few of the previous rounds, so I hadn't had the kind of the rush shedding competition to best prepare me for it. But I got knocked down twice, and then the referee waved it off when I got up the second time and said, that's you done for tonight, son. You live to fight another day. And I felt really bad about that, because losing a close, competitive, good fight is one thing. You don't like to lose, but at least you can feel some kind of pride in taking part in that kind of thing. But to get beat quick like that it feels terrible. So I felt pretty down about that for a little while afterwards as a 15-year-old.
Okay. Yeah, and I bet you're protected when it comes to fights when you're watching Natalie as well.
So when I'm watching Natalie,
when you're watching Natalie when she's in the ring. Like, are you like overprotective over there? So like you're quick enough to jump in when you feel like she's getting hurt.
Natalie doesn't really spar competitively, like anything serious. Natalie hits the mitts, as we call them pads. Americans call them mitts. So in deference to your American co-host, I call them mitts. She hits mitts. She does a little bit of sparring, but it's very kid gloves stuff, careful stuff. I don't want Natalie to do it, seriously, and I don't want her to. One point she was on one of the posters once for what we do. We have this thing called white collar shows that I'm involved with, a promotion called Bad Boy Promotions, and we train ordinary men and women to box, to take their kind of competitive plunge and have a fight. They sell tickets. We give them the whole 9 yards, the big up, the ring walks, the announcements, the glitz and the glamour. And it's like a fire walk for these people. They have, some of them only ever do it once. Some of them like it and they come back. But we do 12-week fight camps for these people, and then we put them in the ring at the end of it. Natalie was on one of the posters once, which the promoter lady was being a bit mischievous, making people think that Natalie was boxing, but she was never actually boxing on it. She just put her on the poster for a bit of glamour, And when Natalie was briefly considering it, I said I didn't want her to do it. You know what I mean? And to be honest, I don't think she really wants to do it. So I don't have to worry about that. She's not going in the ring against anyone who's gonna hit her
absolutely
with any really bad intentions.
Yeah, go on,
we
Andrea.
have one in our family. We have a female in our family, Josette. Josette, she's a MMA fighter as well.
Okay.
And she's good. She actually showed my son Raymond how to get out of being held down.
Yeah. Well,
Josette Cotton's her name.
Okay, I'll look out for her. Females are being taken very seriously in combat sports now, certainly in boxing, certainly in the UK. Mm-hmm. Female boxing is as big as it's ever been. We had Claressa Shields and Savannah Marshall, which was a huge fight over here.
I remember that.
A couple of weekends ago, the weekend before last. We have Katie Taylor topping the bill at Wembley Arena on Saturday. And female boxing is just massive right now. On these shows, the Claressa Shields, Savannah Marshall fight, the whole card across the bill was all female fights. There was not a single male boxer on the show, which was an historical precedent, I think anywhere in the world, probably, certainly in Britain, So the girls are starting to get a kind of, not parity necessarily, because I think that might take another generation or two, but they're certainly drawing fans now who no longer have that prejudice. Male fans, hardcore fans who've been following it for years, are starting to eagerly anticipate certain female matchups, and they're responding to it without prejudice now, and they're simply seeing it as boxing, not a quote-unquote female boxing, which I think that's a good thing for women,
There are more coming in. There's another woman, her last name's Carnelli, and her and I connected as friends. I saw her beat this woman was looking like a giant compared to her, but boy, she took her down. And that's when I was like, oh my goodness, that's probably the first time I actually saw female, boxers or MMA fighters. Yeah. And then I started getting to see Josette, our cousin, the Cotton, to come out. Josette Cotton, seeing her come out, you know what I'm saying? It is getting more popular. It used to be women, they just put them in a tub of mud.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? For the sexual they didn't this kind of disrespectful way.
Yeah, just the erotic context and that, and nothing more. This is the thing. I think it's a breakthrough when you get Claressa Shields versus Savannah Marshall. And also there's another black American female fighter called Alicia Baumgardner. Now, some of the guys were saying, as much as they really wanted to see the fights as well, and they were looking forward to Alicia Baumgardner versus Michaela Mayer as well. And Michaela Mayer is quite an attractive woman too. So I saw guys, as well as they were eagerly anticipating the fights and giving their opinions on who was going to win, some of them were saying, I love Claressa as well, I'm in love with Claressa Shields, or I really fancy Alicia Baumgardner. And I saw that as positive rather than negative, because I saw it as a kind of equality in a way that they were not just being appraised based on their sexuality or their attractiveness or looks, but that was also a part of the equation, just like it was when a whole bunch of girls fancied Oscar de la Hoya. And I thought that was a sign that women had arrived in a big way. And it didn't diminish, because they really wanted to see those fights, and they were absolutely affording them respect as athletes. But some of the fan base as well were based on the fact somebody thinks Claressa Shields is kind of hot too, which I thought that was a good commercial sign as well. You know what I mean? I didn't think it detracted from anything.
Yeah, it can be beautiful and brutal. Okay.
Yeah. Yes. No, I'm just looking at some matches, some fights that's going to happen within the next few weeks as well. So, and Ricky Hatton's on there as well. So
Ricky Hatton's doing an exhibition with a Mexican boxing legend called Marco Antonio Barrera. It's not a real serious sanction.
No, it's an exhibition match though. Yeah.
But it's a big thing for Ricky, and you know what? Because of his mental health and issues and all the rest of it, he is happiest when he's training, and it's a challenge. It's still a big thing to him and to the other guy. And Ricky looks fantastic now. He's absolutely trim because he's training hard again.
I'm going to watch that fight.
Yeah, and Ricky was often over his ideal weight in retirement and drinking too much and all the rest of it. But lately, he looks absolutely fantastic, and he looks young again because he has that light in his life, which is training for a challenge. And I think because it all ends for fighters usually at a certain time in their life when they've been competing at such a level and dealing with the adoration, the adulation, some of them find that a terrible crash, and they can never quite replace the adulation of boxing. So I think it's great that Ricky is able to do this exhibition, and you look at how healthy and glowing he looks now, and it's because he's got something that he cares about.
Yeah, I've seen what type of food he ate when before he retired. Anyway, big fry up with I think it was like 3 eggs and black pudding and stuff like that. So
that was his ritual. What he did, he would live like an absolute Spartan monk on a punishment diet in the lead up to a fight. And he would be, I heard he was on 11 small meals a day, which was like, honestly, like this chicken breast or 3/4 of a chicken breast, a handful of green veg. And some of his meals would be replacements like shakes as well. So he's literally just getting a bit of chicken, bit of broccoli, and then there's your shake, there's your meal replacement. And then once he'd made the weight, because they weigh in the day before for big fights in boxing, once he'd made the weight to 140 pounds right on the nail, he used to go for the next day or the day of the fight, morning of the fight, he would go for this massive breakfast. It was an option called the belly buster at his favourite cafe. And that's what he did. And they asked his nutritionist about it. And his nutritionist, Kerry Case, said, from a nutritional point of view, I hate it. He said, but you have to weigh in a fighter's mentality and his psychology and the balance of his mind and his happiness going into the fight. And that makes Ricky happy. He feels he's already made the weight. The fight's not out of the way. He's still going to do the fight. But he feels he can get away with that fry-up. And he wants it, because he's gone through all that sacrifice leading up to it. So he used to eat a massive fried breakfast on the day of a fight, but it never seemed to do him any harm.
Absolutely. Right. Let's move on to your books, because you've got 3 of them.
4.
4, that's it. 4. Yeah. Which, for everyone, the links are in the description anyway. I've put them in. Let's talk about your first one. What inspired you to think, right, I want to become an author as well?
I think because I've led a checkered life and I'm sometimes capable of being a bit of a raconteur about kind of scrapes I've been in and the thrills and spills of, the sex, drugs and rock and roll kind of path that I went on somewhat in the 90s and traveling to the States and living and staying in the States for 6 months at times on some, certain times of my life. I used to, because of the gift of social media, and I built up a bit of a following, mostly in the context of boxing, I would tell these kind of random stories sometimes because we've all got a platform these days. And people would say, you've got to write these down. To be honest, even pre-social media, people said to me, oh, you should write a book or you've got to write these stories down, etc., etc. And I've been intending to do it since about 2016. I started writing the first one. I figured it was just going to be a straight autobiography, just a one-off effort when I started writing it in 2016. And then I kind of stopped and started for years. And then when the pandemic came in 2020, I kind of got back to it a bit more seriously. And then what I decided was I got to a certain point in my life, still the early part of my life, really, between the years between about 18 and 20, with most of the story being about when I went to the States on my own when I was 20 years old, started in New York, wound up in Boulder, Colorado, and ended up staying there for 6 months. I started roadieing for a band. I really learned to play guitar when I was out there, etc., etc. And I discovered certain things, like experimented with drugs that I was a stranger to before that. And I got to a certain point in the pandemic when I thought, you know what, this would be a kind of cool story if I just finished it here and called it part 1, essentially. So I called it Drink, Drugs, Birds and Boxing, Volume 1. And to me, the reason why I did it, partly because I thought maybe I could see if there was an audience and there was going to be a good response to it. And if so, I'd write a Volume 2. So I put out Drink, Drugs, Birds and Boxing, Volume 1. Some people liked it, and it seemed to do all right. It sold a few copies, It was Natalie who helped me publish a book on Amazon because she's tech savvy. I'm not bad with things, but she's better than I am when it comes to solving IT problems. And while it's not complete rocket science, it is a little bit involved, the whole process of publishing your own book on Amazon, and she's brilliant at that. So during the pandemic, I finished it and said, I'm going to try this, babe. Can we try and release a book? And she said, yeah, okay. Figured out how to do it, did it. And, it went okay. So then I wrote Volume 2, Drink, Drugs, Birds and Boxing, Volume 2. But I still wasn't through with the whole story. I think at this point I had the idea that I was going to write an autobiography in 3 parts, which does seem rather egocentric when you consider that people like Winston Churchill have probably only got 1. But so I did it. And then the third one, I thought you couldn't call it Drink, Drugs, Birds and Boxing, Volume 3. So the last one, which dealt with my final rock bottom and my recovery, as well as a lot of my anecdotes from the world of boxing and my involvement in boxing, I called it Throwing in the Towel, because obviously it's a boxing metaphor, but also they say in recovery and in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous that you can only really win against it. You never beat it, but you hold it to a draw. But the only way you can even start to win is if you surrender and throw in the towel. And that's pretty much what I did when I went to AA in 2017. So that's why it's called Throwing in the Towel. So you have the 2 Drink, Drugs, Birds and Boxing volumes 1 and 2, and you have Throwing in the Towel, and that is my little ragged story, you know, warts and all.
Yeah. I'm looking at them now. Yeah, off Amazon. So yeah, and they're actually cheap as well for everyone to go and purchase. So yeah, I know he's been promoting The Fifth King. So yeah, which that is bear with Wilfred Benitez. So what inspires you about Wilfred?
What it was, I'd already written my own 3 books about my life. I thought, well, you can't do that anymore. You've got to be finished with you now. That's all been done. And I also, at this stage of my life, I don't want to collect any more hair-raising stories. I simply want to live a relatively normal, steady life with no relatable, you know, crazy stories in it now. I've done all those. And so I enjoyed the process of writing a book, and I was encouraged by the feedback I'd gotten. So the next thing I wanted to do is I wanted to write a biography of a great fighter that had not been committed to print before, that had not had his story told in print. And I thought, who hasn't been done and who would interest me? And I thought, well, Wilfred Benitez was the youngest world champion in the history of boxing. It's a record that will almost certainly stand forever, as he was 17 and a half or thereabouts when he won the WBA version of the junior welterweight title in 1976. And he had an interesting story too, and a semi-tragic story, because he burned out very quickly. It was very much a story of too much too young. He was boxing world-class men when he was 13 or 14. He had one of those obsessive fathers who pushed the boys to box to a great degree. And his brothers were boxers too, and they all seemed to burn out early and for, you know, end up with that gym bag full of broken dreams kind of scenario. And Wilfred Benitez particularly, having been so famous and so successful, and he wasn't just a world champion at 1 weight, he won world titles at 3 weights. He's also the youngest fighter ever to achieve that particular distinction. But by the time he was 25, he was kind of walking on his heels, and he had I wouldn't say he had a fall from grace morally. He had a fall from grace physically. He disintegrated in retirement quite alarmingly. He's still alive today. He's cared for around the clock by his sister, Yvonne Benitez. They live in Chicago these days, even though they're from Puerto Rico. And it's just a shame that he's not able to enjoy the fruits of his success. And it's also a shame that the $6 million or thereabouts that he earned in the course of his career, that he doesn't have anything to show for that. So I thought he was a great fighter, that his story ought to be committed to print and told in, you know, in the most in a way that did it justice. And I also thought the story was kind of interesting and poetic because it had its kind of, you know, he was like this brightly burning comet that glimpsed across the boxing landscape, and then you have what one of my friends called the fall of Icarus kind of thing. So that's why I wanted to write about Wilfred, and it seems to have done okay as well.
Wow. Andrea?
I want to know, now you've actually been a boxer. You've actually done this.
Yeah.
Right, Ben?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. So in preparing for your fights, were you ever fearful? Were you ever afraid?
I can't say I was. You know what? I wasn't really afraid per se, but the thing is, when you go to an amateur show when you're a kid, or when you're a young adult even, but especially when you're a kid, when I started, you go. Some of those shows are quite intimidating, to be honest with you, because in the 1980s we didn't have this politically correct filter that we have today. So a typical scenario for me, if I was not boxing at home, you know, when I say at home, I mean on a show in my hometown where my boxing club promoted that show, we would go away and you go in a minibus in a vehicle. And you go in with the back of the vehicle with the other lads. I seem to remember we always seem to break down on the way. And I remember hoping that the car couldn't work again and they wouldn't fix it, because then we couldn't go to the show and wouldn't have to fight. I mean, I know I'm not the only one who felt that way. But unfortunately, we would get there. And then you get to this working man's club, you know, it'd be full of smoke, because smoking was fair game then. Nobody thought this is indecent and it's bad for the young boxer's health.
Yeah.
In a small arena with a low ceiling and these bright spotlights. So there'd be smoke everywhere. there would be things like racist comedians and strippers I would see on afterwards at an age when you probably shouldn't have been seeing that kind of thing, because that was very much a British tradition as well of the 70s, 1980s racist comedian that was seen as no, and black people left too because that was the way our culture kind of functioned and was reared. So it was quite an intimidating atmosphere, and you'd be in the changing rooms, and unless you knew your opponent on the circuit, which sometimes you did, but as often as not you didn't, and you'd be looking around for people who looked about the same size as you and the same age as you, and you'd be looking for the club colours if you knew which club you were boxing against, and you'd be looking for signs of, is that my opponent? And for some reason you'd be looking at people you hoped you weren't fighting because they looked tough or whatever. And you'd see people on the pads who sounded, what kind of intimidating or sharp or whatever. And when you knew who your opponent was, invariably you tended to big them up in your imagination, so they tended to look like Godzilla, even though you probably looked to them. So that was quite intimidating because you didn't. It was a fear of the unknown. And at the shows, there would be men sometimes who were drunk, especially at dinner shows, tuxedo kind of shows. They'd be tended to be a little bit more. I preferred the shows where the ordinary fans went to. When you get them in who were drinking, sometimes betting, and you had a little red sash around your waist or a blue one, depending which corner you were in.
Yeah.
And sometimes you get some guy saying, "Come on, Red," because he's got maybe 50 pounds on you. You know what I mean? And some of it was a little bit. I'm not saying anybody needs to call Childline here and retrospectively look at this case, but it was quite a baptism of fire at that age. You know what I mean? So that was the atmosphere was a little bit intimidating, to be honest with you. But I'm glad I went through it, because what I've noticed in life since is that a lot of things that tend to bother a lot of people don't seem to bother me. And I think a lot of boxers would identify with that they face those scenarios, so they're not really worried about the kind of more trifling things that other people might get bent out of shape about.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I was just hearing a phone then. Was that you, Ben?
No, it's not my phone.
It's mine.
Yeah. Oh, Andrea's phone now.
Yeah.
I can't answer it, though.
Yeah, well, I know Natalie's tuned in now. She's dropped a like on the comments. So, yeah.
Hey, Natalie.
Hi, Natalie. Hope you're well. Right, well, I hate the word advice because that's telling someone what to do. But what feedback would you actually give your 15-year-old self if you saw him right now?
You know what? And I do say it to my 13-year-old son. I would say give yourself options and don't be so. Go to university, I would say. Whether regardless of where it leads to, go to university. Do not bail out at 18 after the sixth form, after the A levels, after the disappointing A level results because you didn't do any work, and figured that your natural ability to pull you out of the situation when they kind of didn't. I would say go to university. I would say keep boxing, have your fun, and and sow your wild oats. But just keep a handle on things. I would say go to university. And I would say you need to be more focused on money and finances. You think it's so desperately unromantic and so, so unspiritual and so cynical and so shallow. But money is important, and stuff like even trying to get on the property ladder and giving yourself some more options. I would say, just be careful. Go to university, keep boxing. And I would also say pursue journalism, from the off. That is one thing that you're good at, and you can have a career in that. But I would have had those things run in tandem. The boxing career, I would have kept it going. I mean, I did come back to boxing when I was like 33, and I had some more amateur fights, including one out in New York. But I'd have said, just explore all your options. Go to university, probably in a journalism direction, and keep your boxing going and see how you get on with that. And then you can turn pro. And you can see how you do from there. And keep an eye on your funds. Keep an eye on your finances. Don't be broke. Don't borrow money. Don't not pay people back. And don't be so damn reckless.
Absolutely, yeah. Because obviously I'm 31 and I now go to university. Because I'm admitting it. I'm blunt as it is. When I was 15, 16 years old, I was a little bastard in school. Which I think we all were, because I believe, and it is that today, egos get in the way.
Yeah.
Egos take over our lives, but I'm 31 now. Yeah, I'm redoing my maths and English. So I'm going to go on to. It's going to take a few years, but get my PhD in psychology, and then there you go.
Exactly, well, and I think actually school is wasted on the young. It's wasted on the youth to an extent. Because I think a lot of people, when you re-enter education at the kind of age that you are, Adam, I'm sure you appreciate it much more and feel so much more focused and responsible for your efforts. Whereas I remember George Foreman as well saying, if school had started at 4 PM, I'd be a college grad today. He just couldn't get his head around getting there so early. Maybe that's another factor.
That is another factor. It sure is.
It is because all we cared about when we was like 15, 16, 17 years old was drugs, drink, and sex.
Well, see, and to me, it was still boxing at that age. To me, I was a bit like, I had a late adolescence because I started waking up to that side of life when I was like 18 or 19 really, to be honest with you. When I left home, got myself a flat, got myself a job in a wine shop, prophetically enough, given my later kind of struggles with alcohol. And then I saw, you know what changed for me? I saw Guns N' Roses at Donington Rock Festival in 1988.
Axl Rose.
That was the summer of 1988, and I wanted to be Axl Rose. Yeah, I mean, I thought Slash was cool, but I wanted to be the rock god up front, vitriolic, and all the rest of it. And that was what really did for me, and knocked my mentality, mindset, and aspirations utterly sideways. They say music changes your life, and I think that Guns N' Roses impacted on mine for the worse. Ultimately, I wouldn't change a thing, but you know what I mean. It was at that point I was at that level, probably of a 15-year-old that you described, when you suddenly cared about those kind of frivolous things and instant gratification. That was my problem. I just couldn't. Even though we're encouraged in the recovery to take things a day at a time, that is a sound principle, but I was taking things a minute at a time in my youth, I suspect, or mid-youth, they probably call it.
I was Tom Sawyer.
You still are.
Yes, I'm Tom Sawyer. I was Tom Sawyer then, and I am now. And I would just tell myself as 15 years old that you can do whatever you set out to do. And I learned that at a young age. So I already, just keep going. You know what I mean? Keep caring about people.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because just me in general, I've actually changed, because when you buy milk from supermarkets, like full fat or green top milk, I used to drink green top all the time, but I now stop it. I stopped it now, and I actually drink my cereal, have my cereal with almond milk, because that's a lot better. Almond milk.
Yes,
I have
that's what I get now.
Milk.
Almond and coconut is my favorite because that makes such a great coffee. The coconut milk on its own is not as good as almond and coconut. That is the one, and it tastes great on cereals like granola or whatever. That is great milk.
I do. Yeah. I loved both, like you said, Ben.
See, you mentioned coffee, Ben. I've gone now over 5 months without caffeine.
Yeah.
Yeah, because caffeine, I believe, is the biggest depressant ever. It's like medication. That's how I'm seeing caffeine. It's medication.
Do you know what? There was something in that. I mean, there's something in that. Bill Hicks, the kind of left field kind of subversive comedian, said that you can tell a lot about a society by the drugs they tolerate. And he said, caffeine to keep you productive from Monday to Friday, and alcohol to keep you too stupid to realise the prison you're in.
There you go.
But I like coffee since I give up drinking. The way I look at it, I'm a special case. It's like, as long as he ain't drinking, everything's fine. Give him all the coffee he needs. But I hear what you're saying. It would be interesting for me to experiment with not drinking coffee for maybe a week or a month, and to see how I feel about it.
That's a challenge. I'm putting that challenge out there.
I mean, I wasn't aware that I had a problem, but now you're saying, maybe I should experiment with that just to see whether I feel holistically better, but without it. I don't know.
I do. I can speak on that. I used to drink coffee all day long. You know what I'm saying?
Like my
and then I'd wonder why I couldn't sleep at night.
See, like my partner's just put coffee's medication for mums. She says that, but it's not. No. It's not. Because in the day, no one's forcing it down us but ourselves, and everything's a choice. But Ben, that's a challenge. I'm not going to say a week. I'm going to say 3 days. Try 3 days without coffee.
I'll try it and see what happens.
3 days. Yeah, because
it's helpful. It's been helpful for me. You know what I mean? And even like you said, Adam, my brain clicked when you said it. You know, it's less depression. It brings on depression. Yeah. You know what? I feel more free from that now.
Exactly. You know? See, I don't drink fizzy drinks, but the only fizz I drink now is elderflower, which you can get 4 cans off Amazon for £4. So I drink that, and it's all organic.
Yeah. Those are the best things for you, elderberries. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I drink elderflower, and you can actually pick the flowers yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyway, we hit that hour mark. So, any last words, Ben?
Just thanks for having me, guys. I'm especially enamored to talk to Terence Crawford's aunt. And to be honest with you, I love Black Americans in any case. I know it sounds a bit like a sweeping statement, but I love Black Americana. I love the accents. I love the swagger. I love the soul of Black America. That's always been a thing for me. So it's been a pleasure. I mean, I've not got nothing against white guys either.
No, it's all right. All right. I'm an outsider anyway.
Yeah.
Andrea?
Well, I just want to say thank you so much, Ben, for coming. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show and to sit here and talk about something that my family loves. You know what I'm saying? And plus, you've authored several books, and congratulations on those. You're encouraging me, so thank you. Thank you. And Adam, I love your challenge. Stop drinking coffee for about a week, Ben. See, and we'll get back. Let us know how it worked for you.
I will do. No problem.
Yeah, well, we've not touched on the music career with Ben, so we need to bring you back for part 2 on that. Talk about your music career.
Yes.
No problem. That's fine.
Absolutely. Yeah. Right. So thank you all, and please share this all, and that's all. So see you later, and don't go anywhere, Ben. We'll talk briefly.
Yeah. No.
Bye, all.